You may also have seen videos of words that are written very similarly, but are pronounced very differently. Who among us non-native English speakers hasn't made the mistake when they said the sentence, "I have been to the beach"? We've all struggled, we've all made somebody chuckle about it or laugh about it, and it's because it's one of these words that is difficult to pronounce, and if you pronounce it just slightly differently, it has a completely different meaning. Now, I've lived in Thailand for 4 years, and I have started to learn the language a few years before that. So when I'm out there, I get understood pretty well. You see, Thai and other languages like Cantonese or Mandarin have different tonalities. And therefore, you can say the exact same word, but just because you haven't said the tonality right, it means something completely different as well. Let's take the example of the word cow in Thai. In English, it's spelled K-A-O, and I only see one way of pronouncing it. Cow, really. But in effect, in Thai, there's so many different ways of pronouncing the word. On top of that, each different way often has a homophone, meaning you pronounce it with the right tone, but it can still have different meanings. Cow, 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 cow. All of these mean something different. However long I learn Thai for, I know that I will never get it perfect. I know that I will continue to sometimes mispronounce certain words because I'll get the tonality wrong, and therefore my words might get misunderstood. Now, I speak Thai pretty well. When I go out there, people understand what I say. I've even done conferences in front of hundreds of people for like 10, 20, 30 minutes, and people afterwards have come to me and said, yeah, we understood what you said. So how do you overcome this? How do you make sure that even though you may still mispronounce some words, you will still be able to be properly and clearly understood? The solution? Context. You need to make sure you explain to people what the context is. We are used to understanding words via the context that the word has been expressed in. Let me use a serious example to explain my point. In Greek, you can have so many different words for the one English word, love. You can have agape, storge, philia. I'm not pronouncing these words right, by the way, but you get the point. In English, you might have to explain what you mean by love. For example, you might need to say a love between two friends, a love between two lovers, or a love a man has for his dog. Every time you give some context so you understand what kind of love you're referring to. But in Greek, they might not need to do that because they have a specific word for each of those. So less context is required. So when you have a tendency to mispronounce certain words, you need to give more context so even if you mispronounce it, people will understand. So let me take a less serious example. If you're going to use the word beach, you're going to usually preface it with something else. You're going to give it a context. You were talking about your holidays, or perhaps you were talking about getting sunburned. So when you are saying, I went to the beach, people actually understand what you mean, even if you mispronounce it. They might chuckle, but they understand. The second thing is, you might want to add an adjective that usually only goes with that word. Connect it with a word that it really goes well with and no other word. For example, I went to a sandy beach. That way people know you're not talking about a female dog or that you're not making a misogynistic remark. Suddenly everything's clear. How about the word sheet? Well, how about prefacing that word with the word white? May I have this white sheet? Again, even if you mispronounce it, it may be even more hilarious, but at the very least, people know you're not talking about what you just did in the toilet or that you're trying to be rude. As I explained in my course, that's one of the reasons that the introduction is so important. When you're going to do a presentation, you need to explain to people what the context of what you're talking about is in the introduction, in simple terms, so that if throughout the presentation, as you get more and more animated and there's a higher and higher risk that you're going to mispronounce something, people know what you're talking about from the context. You may also want to use your outline. You may want to underline words that you have a habit of mispronouncing and choose connected words, words that you can put in front of them like an adjective that is going to put more context to that word and make sure that even if you might mispronounce it, people will understand. They might not even notice. That way, you can speak up and you can speak up in a way that people will understand.